Frankenstein begins when a young man named Captain WALTON takes a ship into the Arctic Ocean. He hopes to make important scientific discoveries, but his ship gets stranded for a few days when a sheet of ice forms all around it. To his amazement, he and his crew see a gigantic man, about 8 feet tall, driving a dog sled across the ice until it disappears in the distance. A little later, they see a normal-sized man on another dog sled chasing the first one. This man is almost dead from exhaustion and exposure, so they take him aboard. The man is Victor Frankenstein, and WALTON becomes friends with him. While Frankenstein is recovering, he tells WALTON his story. Frankenstein grew up in Geneva, where his father was an important figure in the government, and they were well off. He grew up with his cousin Elizabeth, whom his parents expected him to marry. He also had a little brother named William and a best friend named Henry CLERVAL. After this, he leaves home to attend university in Ingolstadt, where his passion for science thrives under the tutelage of WALDMAN, a chemistry professor. Also at Ingolstadt is Henry CLERVAL, a childhood friend of Victor's, who studies morality and virtue indifferently to such subjects. Victor spends day and night in the laboratory, developing a consuming interest in the force that imparts life to a human being. Eventually, Victor's interest morphs into obsession, and he decides to conduct a dangerous experiment to create a human being out of pieces of the dead, haunting cemeteries and charnel houses. Victor tells no one of his ideas, and years pass without him visiting home. Finally, his work is complete. The yellow eyes of the creature open the experiment, a success, but when Victor beholds the creature's grotesque form, he is horror-stricken and flees the laboratory. When he returns, the creature has disappeared, abandoning the study of science that once captivated him. Victor joins Henry in studying languages and poetry. The next day, his friend CLERVAL arrives at the university, but Frankenstein becomes ill. CLERVAL spent all winter nursing him, and he feels ill whenever he thinks of the monster he created, but he hopes it has disappeared forever. However, he soon receives word from home that his younger brother William has been murdered in the countryside near the Frankenstein estate. Traveling back to Geneva, Victor is seized by an unnameable fear arriving home. He staggers through the countryside in the middle of a lightning storm. Racked with grief, suddenly he sees a figure illuminated in a flash of lightning. He instantly recognizes it as his grotesque creation at that moment. He realizes the monster is his brother's murderer. Joining his family at the estate, Victor is horrified to learn that the Frankenstein's maid, Justine, has been falsely accused of the murder. After William's locket was found in her possession, convinced that no one will believe his story about the monster, Victor remains silent, and Frankenstein watches Justine's trial, and his cousin Elizabeth testifies to her innocence, but she is convicted and sentenced to death. Justine is executed for the crime months later. The family goes on a sightseeing trip, and when Frankenstein goes mountain climbing alone, the monster appears, making him listen to its story. The monster begins to narrate what he has experienced since fleeing Victor's laboratory, racked by hunger. He wandered great distances, eventually taking shelter near the cottage of a French family. Observing them, he acquired language as well as an extensive knowledge of the ways of humanity. Although he eventually befriended the family's blind patriarch, who was drawn to the monster's refinement, he was eventually driven away by the old man's kin, full of self-loathing. The monster learns language from them and finds shelter in a shed built against a cottage. The DELACYs, a rich family in Paris, helped a Turk escape, leading to their banishment and relocation to the cottage. The monster wants to befriend them but is rejected, feeling doubly abandoned when they leave. It destroys the cottage and embarks on a journey to find its creator. The monster decided to travel to Geneva and seek revenge on Victor. The monster gets shot while helping a woman in Geneva. It grabs a little boy, mentions his father's name is Frankenstein, and kills him for revenge. The monster strangled him, stealing the boy's locket. The creature fled to a nearby barn, where he became entranced by Justine's beauty. Suddenly, he was gripped by the realization that she could never return his love, waging revenge on all women. He planted the locket in her dress. The monster concludes his tale by denouncing Victor for his abandonment and demanding that he build a female mate to keep the creature company. Victor agrees to journey to England and then Scotland to study and build the female monster. However, halfway through completing her, Victor grows apprehensive that the two monsters will spawn more horrifying creatures and tears the female companion apart before his monster's very eyes. The creature emits a tortured scream and vows to visit Victor on his wedding night. After disposing of the female corpse in a Scottish lake, Victor comes upon his friend Henry's lifeless body, sure that the monster has punished him again. Victor returns to Geneva. He marries Elizabeth like they've been planning their whole lives. He thinks the monster is planning to kill him on his wedding night, so he sits up waiting with a gun, but the monster actually kills Elizabeth. His father dies of grief soon afterward, so Victor has lost everybody. Victor devotes his life to finding the monster and destroying it. Frankenstein chases it into the Arctic. He recounts his tale to Walton, and after he tells Walton the whole story, he dies in the pursuit. The monster comes on board the boat to pay a final farewell to Frankenstein. He tells Walton he's vowing self-destruction because he didn't mean to be bad. Walton winds up taking the ship back home. Walton reflects on the cost of scientific discovery. The Frankenstein story shows that scientific discovery isn't worth sacrificing your life for.